Welcome to the 100 Guitarist Podcast. My name is Nick Millivoy.
And I'm Jason Shadrick.
And every week we are talking about one of the 100 guitarists that we think you should know about. Today's episode comes from Jason Shadrick's wheelhouse. Jason, who are we talking about today?
We're talking about the Texas shredder himself, Eric Johnson.
Okay. Well, as you'll find out by listening to our episode, I don't bring a lot to this discussion, so we brought in some outside help. But I'm going to stand in for the audience members here who aren't big Eric Johnson fans, who want to know more about Eric Johnson. What's everybody listening for? What's everybody hearing? What is so great about Eric Johnson's music? And I'm going to ask the big questions of these guys.
So you can get at us each week. You can email us at 100guitarists@premierguitar.com. Or you can call or text, leave a voicemail at 319-423-9734. That goes immediately to Nick's cell phone. So anytime you want, you can just ring him up and yell at him for his incorrect opinions.
Yeah. Give me a call, and it doesn't have to be about Eric Johnson. Feel free to call and talk to me about how my opinions about the Grateful Dead are outstanding.
Yeah, they are.
And if you haven't checked out that episode, head over there.
Yeah.
Head over there. Listen to what I have to say about the Grateful Dead.
A lot of
Jason
action on the
also has
Grateful
some
Dead.
things to say. It's less important.
A lot of action on the Grateful Dead episode.
But before we proceed talking about Eric Johnson, we want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Two Rock. Two Rock amplifiers are hand-built by master craftspeople in the company's Rohnert Park, California factory. Each amp is tested and voiced by Eli Lester. As a discerning guitarist, you know that the road to great tone begins with great components. Two Rock's classic design, carefully selected parts, and hand-built approach combine to make an extremely versatile instrument that you will have for life. Eric Johnson has been playing Two Rocks in his rig since, I think, around 2017. Is that right?
Yep. And if you've ever, I've played a number of Two Rocks. I reviewed some. They're some of the most solidly built amps I have ever played. When you pick it up, you just feel like this thing is a rock, and they sound great.
Is it Two Rocks?
It's Two Rock. Exactly.
Okay.
Dad joke. So today our guest is Andy Wood. You might know him from his time playing with Rascal Flatts. You might know him from his time with his pretty successful YouTube channel. He also has a guitar camp down in Tennessee called the Woodshed, which just took place here a couple weeks ago. He had Steve Morse. Last year, he had Eric Johnson. And as we discuss in the episode, he has recently become the steward now of one of Eric's old Marshall Super Leads, which we go into pretty in depth, and we even not conclusively come to a discovery about that particular amp.
Yeah. And Andy, we had this conversation with Andy already, and I will say that I think this is a really informative thing that we got into. Andy obviously knows a lot of stuff about Eric Johnson, has a lot of opinions, and has done the research, as have you, as much as I'm joking about arguing with you. But you gave me a really nice list of tracks, of your favorite tracks, to help me get my brain moving in the right direction with this stuff.
And Andy's tracks, like, those are the ones that I want to go back and listen to again.
Yeah, he's got a whole different
approach to it. Yeah.
Yeah, which is awesome. And I think that that speaks to Eric Johnson's like wide range of his catalog, right?
Dig it. All right, so let's get to it. Here's our talk with Andy Wood. All right, everybody, we have the illustrious Andy Wood joining us today to talk all about Eric Johnson. There are a few people on earth that I enjoy talking about Eric Johnson's playing and music more than Andy. So Andy, welcome to the show.
Man, it's good to be here. I was stoked when I saw the text and the subject matter. That's definitely something I enjoy.
That's an easy yes. So first thing we want to do is we want to talk about how well your video is framed here. This vintage Marshall that's sitting over your shoulder right underneath the old Van Halen cover there.
Signed. Van Halen cover is signed by Ed, by the way, just so we're all keeping score.
Oh.
Yeah,
You're
that's
just
right.
You're not framing just any old Van Halen cover.
No, sir.
So tell us about this Marshall and why we are talking about it on an Eric Johnson episode.
Yeah, so there's actually two gentlemen that I've known for a long time. I'm not going to say their names because I don't know how public they like that. One of them has worked with Eric and bought gear from Eric for a very long time. And then on my song Junktown, or on my album Junktown, there's a song called Back to Austin. It's obviously the old tip of the hat to EJ. And one of my friends brought down an amp that he bought from EJ. It was a 68, Plexi, and brought a Strat that he bought from EJ. And that's what was recorded on that album. So obviously I gave him the old name your price. What's it going to take for me to take that off your hands? Not for sale, right? He's like, man, my friend's got the other one. And I was like, what do you mean the other one? And he said, Eric sold two of them. I got one, he got the other. I'll text him. And this was probably 9 years ago, Jason, maybe 8 years ago when this transpired. Well, last year, the friend said, man, I'm so proud of you, so proud of your career and everything that you're doing. And I think it's only appropriate that you have the EJ amp and it goes to someone who's going to take care of it. And I said,
and use it.
And play it. I just used it on a session the other day. Like and that was his thing. He's like, this doesn't need to sit and just be looked upon. And I said, great. I don't have $45,000, but let me sell a kidney or figure out what it is. He actually he said, look, I'm going to sell it to you what I bought it from Eric for. And I was just blown away. Not only did he have it, Eric obviously, with the golden ears that he has, there's certain Fender preamp tube in a certain slot and all this kind of stuff. It's just the way it came. And the guy didn't play it that much. So it's, it's got low miles and brand new tires and the AC blows cold, and when you kick it on and hit the front of it with any of the Eric approved accoutrements, like a Zen drive or a tube driver or anything, it's like, now all I got to do is practice because the tone's there.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, this one belonged to Eric, and here's one more little funny one. We had Eric as a guest of honor last year at Woodshed, and it was great, right? So I take the amp and we had it there so he could look at it, and I mean I've got the photo of him looking at the back of it and smiling real big. If you guys know, in the Austin City Limits performance, like the one with the bandleader coat, there's an amp that's not being used. It's the backup amp. It doesn't have a logo on it. Now, I didn't want to go to Eric and go, hey, is this the one that was the backup amp? I started it. I was trying to be smooth and not too much of a creep. And I was like, how many 100 waters super leads have you had? And he's like, oh man, I don't know, a lot. And I said, have you had more than a dozen? He goes, probably 2 dozen. I've probably had right around 2 dozen. I said, how many have had no logo on the front? He goes, oh, only 2. So there's a 50-50 chance that this baby was on the stage at Austin City Limits. And in my mind, I'm just going to go, don't ever ask any more questions and just let the imagination do what it does. But it sounds fantastic. I just used it on a session for a really big producer maybe about 2 weeks ago. And I've got all of my amps on the wall on a amp switcher so I can just quickly do it. And I went through and I was like, hit that one. And I was like, oh, there it is. That's the right answer right there. Because it does so much different stuff besides just the EJ thing, right? I mean, it's just an old super lead that doesn't have any mods. Everybody's into modded Marshalls, right? Like the Friedman thing and Soldano's thing. Like everybody loves that. But the real trick to some of the greatest tones that we worship is no, you need one that hasn't been messed with, because that's definitely got a thing that people love,
What's your favorite non-EJ tone? Maybe let me rephrase that. What was the biggest when you really got that amp and started to plug it in and started to really explore what it can do? What was the biggest surprise about that amp? Because it can do the EJ thing, obviously, no questions asked. What did you find? You're like, wow, I didn't realize this amp could do this.
I should have known it could do it, but some of the really nice West LA type of things that were in the more Huff, Luke Landau kind of world, put a dirt pedal on the front of it, boost it up, and it gets into that kind of thing really nicely. And the other thing it'll do really well is some of the like Keith Urban kind of Nashville back pickup telly, but driven kind of thing. It does that really well. Like specifically, the era of Love Somebody Like You, where he was using Matchless and some old Marshalls and stuff like that. Like it really nails that stuff too. And there's a Jeff Beck kind of sound living in there. I mean, it's just such a people sleep on the clean tone, the Hendrix Wind Cries Mary thing. Like that's living in that thing too.
So let's go back to when you first encountered Eric's music. How old were you? What was it? Because you didn't start as a guitar player.
No, sir.
You started as a mandolin player.
Yeah.
So were you trying to figure out Cliffs of Dover on mandolin?
Actually, no. I was working in Pigeon Forge. The ironic thing is like Cliffs of Dover, when it's played on acoustics and mandolins and fiddles, it sounds like a fiddle tune. Like it's not that far away from something you would hear off of, the Tony Rice Unit or Newgrass Revival or a Bela Fleck record. It's not that far away, you know? So Eric and Steve Morse, obviously they were big gateway drugs for me to get into other kind of music because it was close enough, but the fiery playing was, the allure. Where I was when I first heard Eric was I was out of being a junior in high school-ish, senior in high school-ish. I was working in Pigeon Forge at a theater, like a theater show like Branson or whatever. Pigeon Forge has got a bunch of those. And I was backstage and I just played acoustic guitar and mandolin in the show. And the electric guitar player had his electric guitar, and I was just playing like fast alternate picking lines because that's all I knew how to do because of bluegrass. And he looks at me, he's like, "Oh man, you must love Paul Gilbert." I was like, "Who's that?" And he's like, "Oh, you must love like Steve Morse, right? Because you sound." I was like, "No clue." And he's like, "Oh man." So he comes back the next day, and he's got every other day or so, he would have another little treat for me, and he would burn copies of High Tension Wires, Passion and Warfare, and then he dropped that Avia Musicom on me. And I heard that intro on that first note, and I was like, what am I? My life has changed. We all, as players, have those little butterfly moments that just ripple out. Hearing that was definitely one of those moments. So then I'll tell you how late it was. They were doing or had just finished the release of the first G3 thing.
Yeah,
and that was
record.
That's whatever time frame that was. I was about a junior in high school, whatever year that was, ish, right? Or that's just like where my brain's got it. And it leveled me. And I don't want to say that it was the same year, but it's like that's when I found it, right? Like that's like Eric no longer had the big spiky haircut, when you start time stamping your favorite guitar player's looks, He no longer looked like that. So and I remember getting that, and then Venus Isle coming out a few years later, and I remember all of that being a thing, and just being obsessed with it. Like I had to learn everything I could do. And the great thing is, guys, I was dirt poor growing up. Like my dad was a cop, and my granddad ran construction. And that's my mom kind of worked front office jobs where she could get them. And that was a luxury and a blessing that I didn't know I had because I had a Peavey Bandit and a Boss overdrive pedal and a Dynacomp. And that's what I had. So it's like I started chasing the tones and the playing, and it really made me focus on the things that I could control, like pick angle, dynamic, how notes were delivered. I couldn't think about all this other stuff that like you have to sound like Cliffs of Dover. I just had to do with what I had. So that was my opening volley into not only Eric's playing, but just electric guitar as a whole.
So, okay. So I explained to you before we started recording, I'm sort of like, I'm a stand-in for the audience of this podcast, who might not necessarily, some people, obviously, probably a lot of people listening to this podcast are going to be Eric Johnson fans, but then there's going to be some of us that are guitar fans that aren't Eric Johnson fans. That's sort of where I come in. Which isn't to say I have anything against Eric Johnson. I just haven't spent a lot of time with this catalog. I know Cliffs of Dover, obviously. I might have taught some students, the main melody or something, but I've never gone into it. And so, Jason gave me, I said, Jason, give me your 5 Eric Johnson songs that I'm gonna spend time with these. I mean, I've been listening to a lot of stuff this week, but
it turned into 6.
Give me your 5.
Maybe
it's
7.
7.
Okay, I'm gonna give you some really good ones here that are that
See if they line up with what I
before we
said.
get to those, I want to go back to just what you said about you're as a kid, you're listening to his guitar playing, and you don't have the gear to do it. You have to figure it out in your hands. Can you tell me a little bit about like what you heard in his guitar playing that you were going for? Like you heard this thing about his sound and like how you chose to take that on.
Yeah, there's really 2 answers that I heard that I loved. And we'll save the tone answer for the second one, right? The sound, right?
The sound
The
is
first
by
thing
the
that
amp. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, for sure. We all know that, right?
Yeah.
The first thing that I heard in his playing was freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like a drug. I was like, this guy's the most free player. That's, it's like 17-year-old me was used to improvising. Like improvisation is such a thing in bluegrass.
Yeah.
And so when that G3 came out and they're all trading solos, obviously it's Satriani and it's Vi. You got 2 of the greatest guitar players on the planet. And then you got Eric, and Eric just has a freedom of what he comes across like he's really limitless on how he wants something to be. That was number 1, was just that liberty on the instrument.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing, obviously, people goo-goo and gaga over that lead tone till the cows come home. But man, those cleans on Trademark was just like glass shattering when he would hit those things. And that, like whatever that plate reverb was, it's really interesting because, live he doesn't use reverb. Like maybe some reverb from the amp, maybe like on those twins or something.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw him, he had at Woodshed, he had a little 2-rock for the lead amp, and then 2 little Princetons. I think it was Princetons, right, John? My guitar tech's on the other side. It was Princetons for the clean tone, right? And so, when you listen to the records have way less low end just than he does in the room, right? And that's a mix master thing. But whenever he would hit those tones on the those cleans on some of those tunes, like specifically Trademark, like it just sounded like glass shattering and like floating in midair, like something you would see in like the Matrix movies or something. Like glass would shatter and just freeze. Like that's what it always sounded like. And that was one of the big things outside of like, hey, what does everybody call it in every interview? The 800-pound cello. It's like everybody says that
violin tone,
violin tone, whatever you want to call it, right? Like the EJ tone, right? And I think there's a nice little straight line of irony. Obviously Joe Bonamassa loves Eric and murders some of those cascading lines. And I have the same answer that Joe has when people chime in on a comment like, well, it sounds like Eric Johnson. I'm just like, thanks. It's like at that point, what more can you say? It's like, oh man, I wish you'd do something that sounded like yourself. It's like, well, man, we're all just amalgamations of our heroes, and you can't hear Eric and not hear Hendrix. You can't hear Eric and not hear Clapton. Like those things are just there, and we all just live in that line of passing things around and letting them mutate, and that was the thing, and Eric having that Southern Texas thing in his playing, that was something that my mind could grasp because I was playing a lot of Southern music, and I loved ZZ Top and stuff like that, and Allman Brothers and all of that kind of stuff. And then shortly after, I was going to the University of Tennessee for jazz, so it was just this melting pot of where I was at in my life when that stuff hit me. So yeah, you want to do the five EJ things?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, one second. I'm gonna hold off. I would say that G3 record though, that was my gateway as well because I knew Satriani and I knew Vi, and I remember going to Sam Goody. Like I'd heard about it, reading about it in a guitar magazine, and I bought the CD and the VHS at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Because I was no clue who Eric Johnson was. No clue. I'm buying it for these 2 other guys who are.
But boy, you did after you listened to it, didn't you?
When he started playing that Manhattan, on there.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like,
So that would have
wow.
been post Venus Isle, right? I had my dates
Oh, yeah.
backwards. Yeah. Sorry, I had it backwards, right? That
So
shows how young
that
and
album
stupid
came
I
out.
was.
That came out like summer '97.
Okay, yeah,
was-
that's about right. So
was
that would
when
have been
that
out a
G3
couple of
came out.
years. That would have been out a year or two before I was a junior in high school. So yeah.
And just like hearing him, you know, and the thing is, on the cover, he's there with a 335.
Right.
That's
And
right.
the
So-
cans.
And the cans. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. So this guy's just going his own way. He's not
Yeah.
playing an Ibanez with a double locking tremolo.
Yeah.
His phrasing is, I would say, a bit more sophisticated, you could say. It's from a teenage kid's perspective who didn't know anything. It wasn't just all over the top, you know, that kind of stuff. And it had a bit more jazz to it, which were kind of where my ear was going. And to me, I came out after listening to that record, and every morning I'd put in that G3 video and watch it before school, you know. And then later on, I kind of went back. The other thing is, he didn't play Cliffs of Dover's not on that record,
Right.
you know.
Right.
So I didn't really connect his biggest hit with that first record. It was Zap, though. The Zap on that live record is unbelievable. Unbelievable.
We actually that's one of those tunes that like AW Trio has we covered that on Shiprock one year. We're like, all right, Shiprock is like this big, you know, this kind of festival in the water. They're like, what covers do you want to do? And we're like, all right, we'll do Rooster. Taylor Hawkins just died. I was like, we'll do Everlong and let's do Zap. And they're like, you gonna do it? I was like, yeah, let's do it, man. It's just a rocker, you know? And so you can always tell on those events where like the guitar guys are, because immediately they hear the intro, they start flipping out. But Zap would definitely be, you know, one of his, in a career that just seems like all of the top of the mountain, that would definitely be one of those like peaks of Gondor type of moments, right?
I will
right,
say
now
Jason
give us-
pointed me towards Zap, and
Yeah.
I had heard it on the G3 record, but like coming back to it, like it's a ripper, man.
That
It's
intro.
like it's a fast
Intro is
boogie, you know?
awesome,
It's like that's
phrasing
a
is
southern
awesome.
thing.
Yeah.
The bridge is really clever. You know, there's just so many
Mm-hmm.
great, you know, bass solo and it not being stupid, like Roscoe Beck. You know, no offense, bass players, but you know, those jokes exist for a reason.
All right, Andy, give us your if Nick yesterday were to ask you, hey, I'm diving deep into Eric, give me 5 tracks.
Yeah, get me there.
Okay, 5 things. I'm not gonna try. I'll just rattle them off. If you don't know, Cliffs of Dover has to be the thing. If you don't know, let's let that sit to the side because that's a thing in and of its own entity.
Yeah.
So I've
and
got
that little
5
descending pedal point lick that always triggers when the drum roll comes in. It's not
Yeah.
super it's difficult to play warp speed, but it's a lick that most people can get under their hands and
Yeah.
figure it out, you know.
Right. And I think that kind of has anything that exists within Cliffs of Dover has to sit in its own Mount
Right.
Rushmore, right? Push that aside.
Right.
A dark horse that I'm going to go with is Emerald Eyes from the record that was before the Tones record, and I don't know if that's in a what's this thing called, the Electromagnets? Is that right?
Yep, the Electromagnets.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know if that was that or not, but Emerald Eyes is one if you can find. I think it is on Spotify. It may have got released in a compilation, a re-release kind of thing. That's one that people sleep on because it's in the pre-Tones era EJ. I could
Yeah.
be a total loser and just start naming albums, but that's cheating. So I'm not going to name albums.
That's cheating. That's
I'm
asking a lot of your listening audience. Yeah.
I would say Emerald Eyes and Trademark for sure. Like I would say Manhattan for sure. And then these two are going to be bangers out of nowhere. Desert Rose and Highlanders.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That's if you
we're
don't
talking
know
album versions.
Yeah. I mean, I would say any version's a Scalder, but Eric's outro solo, and I would say you could sub anything in that top 5 for the Venus Isle reprise that leads into track 2, right after Venus Isle, the song on Venus Isle, because Eric loved to put things together, like the intro to Avia Musicom and Cliffs of Dover kind of is one thing.
Right.
Track 1 and track 2 on Venus Isle is kind of one thing. So instead of choosing one of two of those, that's kind of its own entity as a body of work. So I specifically just chose tunes that stood as singular units, that you didn't have to listen to two songs, because again, that's cheating, right? Like, I don't want to do that. The 5 standalone tunes, and I have reasons. I think Eric has a really pretty songwriting style, and that has to be addressed just like you would address his, white hot guitar playing. So I think Desert Rose has one of those really pretty melodies and really great song. Like, you could have a piano player just play that with like a really pretty voice singing it, and it would stand on its own merits with no guitar whatsoever. That's got to be addressed as a pillar of this guy's greatness. And then the flanger solo on Highlanderans is one of those, he paints with a canvas that's pretty based around 3 main tones: the clean, the middle, the lead. Eric doesn't use a lot of what I call gag effects, like fuzzes, like crazy fuzzes, or, filtered things, or all these modulations. He doesn't really live in that world. He's got his 3 main sounds. And it's really neat that when he does use a gag effect, like a wah or a flanger, the wah at the end of Desert Rose, the flanger in Highlanders, that's not something that shows up throughout his catalog all the time, So that's my reasoning behind it. And then, of course, the playing is absolutely lethal on that outro solo of Desert Rose. Like, lethal.
Okay.
I'm surprised you didn't pick when you said going outside, like a song for like an acoustic fingerstyle thing.
Song
because
for
this
George.
fingerstyle playing,
It's magnificent.
it's really, really good.
But if you didn't know Eric, and that was my perspective, I wouldn't want to hand you that and you think that he's like a Pete Huttlinger or a Tommy or kind of player.
Because that's an outlier in his catalog for sure.
Yeah, again, like having those acoustic things aren't what you're gonna get when you go see him live.
Okay.
You might get that as a moment within the show,
right?
But that's not the show. So my thing is definitely the perspective of Nick has never heard Eric Johnson. I'd be like, take 5 of these and call me in the morning.
That's right.
So let me tell you this, and I'm curious what you guys think about this. Jason and I have talked about this a little bit already. Just like going through sampling the whole catalog, grabbing stuff from here and there, and I'm listening to stuff from records, and I'm saying, okay, this sounds great. This sounds great. I am so much, and this is like, I'm saying something obvious just about, maybe not obvious, but just, general about music, live music versus studio music. But the 2 live in Austin recordings, 84, 87, those move me.
I mean, those are his best records.
Those move me so much more than anything I found on a studio record, which isn't to say I didn't like anything from a studio record, but like the 84 Cliffs of Dover, I'm just like, oh, this is like, I've always, I like Cliffs of Dover. I'm not saying, like you said, it's this other thing.
But are you gonna recommend a live thing? Like, I can't recommend a live thing, because then I would just go, hey, go listen to Eric Johnson live.
Right.
The end.
The end.
But like, I'm curious, like, is this just the deal, right? Like, I'm listening to those and I'm like, oh wow, this smokes everything else. Like, because I'm hearing in those things is just like his phrasing is like, you're talking about his freedom as a player. I'm hearing his phrasing on that stuff and stuff that, licks that are on the record, but he's just like that little bit of humanness to it that's happening live with the band.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's killing me. And I'm like, I get it. I get what's going on here. I hear, and the sound too. It's like, the sound is, it's not as polished as a record, but it's like as a vehicle for expression. I hear his sound. I'm like, damn, that amp sounds amazing. Like, he's just like, it's just everything's just burning,
Yeah, the live stuff is definitely like where you end up.
Yeah,
there's no question.
Yeah.
Like that's what everybody reveres. I guess, I mean, I don't have enough time on the podcast to tell the great stories that he told, but really good one was he was telling us about they were so fried at the end of the tour that they were just ready to kind of go home and just get the show over with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the Austin City Limits in the band leader coat. He's like, we were so cooked. He's like, we loaded out as fast as we could, and we got home. We'd been on the road for months, and then the band leader coat ended up at a Goodwill, like not long after that.
No way.
Oh,
Way,
man.
yeah. So it's like, and shout out to Eric. It's I've been very blessed. People say don't ever meet your heroes, and he's just another one of those guys that proves that statement wrong. Like guys like him and Brent and Steve and Eric, like they're great. They're great. They're just great people. And Eric is, I wouldn't use the word recluse, but he stays in Austin, stays in his world. And man, you get him out to just talk about things, and he's just such a student, still loves it. He's not secretive at all. Like he was just telling everybody about what he was using. And you know what? He's not even got this thing, to do a small clinic performance thing. And he's got that 2-rock, and he's got a Dover drive and a Zen drive and a memory man, and not even using the memory man for the delay, using it for the preamp, and just walks everybody through it. And he's like, and that's it. And we're all just standing there. Me and Letary are standing next to each other. It's like, that's not it. That's not it. And he hits the first note. We go, that's it. Yep, that's it. Yeah. Because, at the end of the day, it's just how much velocity has in his right hand, that perfect amount, that perfect angle, and then how in tune he is throughout the fretboard. These are the things that can't be purchased. Those are the sweat equity items that really define his sound and his thumbprint. And man, he was playing those Princetons in that little 2-rocket, barely louder than speaking volume. And it's like, hit record, there's Venus Isle right there. Like just, there it is. There's different details of minutia, different minute little baby details that change from rig to rig. But at the core value is all of that stuff that I was talking about that makes it really him. And, of course, I would say the live records. I mean, something that predates me and probably you two guys too, apparently. And this comes from my friend Jimmy Green. Jimmy was the guy that gave me all those CDs, those burnt CDs. He said back in the day in the guitar magazines, they would have like a record that was like a page or something.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what that was, and he was like, that's like the origin point of Eric for a lot of that age group, a lot of that demographic.
Steve Vai too.
Yeah. Okay.
Vai
right.
Too, yep.
Right.
So blue powder was the
one of those.
One I remember. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So that's and just addressing the different angles that you can start in and jump off of and get to. It's like when you type in Eric Johnson on YouTube, it's coming up. Austin City Limits. Like that's the one that everybody keeps watching. But I think I would be remiss to put that in the 5 starting points if you've never heard him, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying anything's the right answer or the wrong answer, but it's just like, I think that's where you end. That's the reward for checking out all the different angles of his playing. And that live, some of those live performances, they don't address the beauty that's on Venus Isle and some of the stuff he did afterwards, right? Venus Isle is a magnificent record. Like it's got so much, man. Song for Lynette, like these piano things. Like Eric is a world-class piano player, and like, hey, if you want to get deep cuts, he's playing sessions on Christopher Cross records. It's like, you can really get in the rabbit hole if you want to chase the thread of all the things, and I think that's the beauty of Eric. If you ask Ian Thornley, he's going to give you 5 different answers. And if you ask, it's like we've all got our different things that we equate to the greatness. I think AT would, rattle off 5 different things as well,
Great. One quick question about Venus Isle. Do you know what the original name of the album was? Trivia.
Oh, wow. I didn't know it had another name. That whole thing predates me being an electric guitar player, so I don't know.
To the point where there were actually promo CDs. There are actually promo CDs out there with a different name on the record.
Was it the same cover with the angel and
I
a
haven't
different
seen
name?
one. I'm just
okay.
I'm going a little bit by Wikipedia here. We're gonna take this with a grain of salt. Travel One Hope was the name.
I'm glad he chose Venus Isle because the phonetic of Venus Isle, just from the taking away the actual meaning of the words, just the phonetic of Venus Isle sounds like the way he plays. Just it just floats, you know.
And
Travel One Hope is very, you know, phonetically harsh.
Too many hard consonants in that.
Yeah.
One thing that was really influential to me as a kid were his instructional videos, the fine art of guitar.
Right.
That I remember saving up like $60 to buy it.
Yeah, and $60 in the 80s. I mean, dude, the 90s, you know, I guess 90s is a better way. $60 in the 90s.
This was in the late 90s.
Yeah,
like
that's right.
$60 for, I'm like, yeah, we got to do it.
Bro, that's like, that was a Super Nintendo cartridge.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's how I learned about harp harmonics, his Kodo thing. You know, that's he's the first guitar player I ever heard talk about muting, left and right hand muting when you're playing. And that's how his line sounded so clean and all that stuff.
Yeah, and that's another thing that, you know, a lot of guys that play that are used to one style of guitar sound, like that are used to a, you know, more gainy kind of sound, they get on those darker tones and it starts driving them because they can't control, you know, how the accuracy. Like, it's funny, you get the richer and more weight you get on a note in your sound. Like when you have one of these, the interesting thing is like the trick, if there is a trick, the trick is being Eric, but if there is a trick, it's on, you know, Marshall style amps, you've got to run all the tone controls like barely on, like that. None of the tone controls can be up. And then you run the amp super, super loud. And then on the cleans, it's a bit of the opposite, where you're running all the tone controls up and the amp not loud, like, or not breaking up, right?
Yeah.
Crystalline. So when guys play the rigs that have that going on and all of that weight on the note, it's like out of control because everything's so forward, and that muting is like 3 times as important. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
To get the notes to maintain without being cluttered.
Well, Andy, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us what you have going on. I know you just had a new album come out.
Yeah,
you just had the Woodshed.
Yeah, baby.
Which will probably be back next year, right? People can look out for that.
We actually are over halfway sold out for next year. So just in a couple of days, we've already had 53 signups. If you are interested in coming to the Woodshed, I can't stress it enough. Get on there and go. I'll actually, I'll contact my web guy today, and I've got John Cooper documenting. Let's do a Riverside podcast discount. So let's do Riverside 200. That if you hear this and you want to come to Woodshed, we'll give you $200 off just for this, and we'll run this code. What do you say, guys? We'll run this code for a month, right? From the moment
when this starts. Yep,
a month from when this starts. Yeah, and we'll have Riverside 200. So that's just something for you guys.
There we
Woodshed is 4 days of learning with some of the best players on the planet. Previous artists we've had: Joe Bonamassa, Robin Ford, Tosin Abasi, Eric Johnson, Steve Morse, Brent Mason, Andy Timmons. It's like dadgum Avengers, you know what I mean? So if you want to be a part of this thing, woodshedguitarexperience.com. We will be doing it in September of 2025, and we'll be announcing things.
Now, those 53 you've already sold,
yeah,
all they know is that you're going to be there, basically.
That's right.
You haven't announced any. They're just taking your word based on the lineups from before that it's going to be a good time. So
those 53, to be even more appreciative, that they sold immediately after Saturday night's concert. We opened the store online, and you know, the signups. So that's how special this event is, and we limit it to 100. So we've got 47. We got 47 slots left. If you guys want to get in on it, it's really magical. Now, with that said,
tell people where it's at. Tell people where it's at if they don't know.
Oh yeah, it's about 75 miles from Nashville. It's in Crossville, Tennessee. It's right in the middle between Knoxville and Nashville. So yeah, it's beautiful. We own a lakefront property, and we do everything right there. You're not staying at a at a resort where you have to turn off your amps at 10 o'clock. We can play all night long. So it's really fun.
All right.
And the
buddy.
album. So the album is Charisma, and that's on it's everywhere. Spotify's and all that good stuff. And andywoodmusic.com is where you can go to hear the album, see music videos, and get the tour dates for where we're going to be playing. And you know, we'll see you on the road for sure.
Go watch the video, chicken picking video just for Brent's cameo in that
Yeah,
one.
so we have Free Range Chicken, which was the first single off the record, and Brent Mason did a guest solo. So watch that. And then the new single is out, which is an instrumental reimagining of the Alice in Chains song Rooster. So that's the only cover on the record, but go check those out on YouTube.
Dig it. All right, buddy. We'll talk soon.
It's great
Thanks,
talking to you,
guys.
Andy.
Cheers, Nick.
All right, so that was our interview with Andy Wood. We are now all well versed in the book of EJ, knowing where to look, what to listen for.
Yeah, we got some homework to do. I'm
got
glad.
some homework.
I like coming out of these with homework to do.
We found some mythology around that Marshall amp. Is it? Is it not? ACL? What? We'll have to go back and look. But yeah, I think, and even every time we do one of these episodes, even if it's a player I'm into, like I always go back. It's like, okay, that's why I like that player. Now I'm gonna go back and listen to him some more. So, but now Nick, yeah, any day now you're gonna be ripping off that pedal point lick from the intro to Close to Dover.
Hey
Any day
man,
now.
if I can sound like he did on Austin City Limits playing that, like I'm down.
I'd play it.
That
Exactly.
that could be a new guitar personality for me.
All right. Well, thanks again to 2Rock for sponsoring this episode. Head on over to 2Rock's website to check out all their latest models. They have a handful of new models coming out. So thanks again to Eli and the cats over at 2Rock, and we will see you all next week.